Hello, can anybody hear me?
I hear you.
Great.
You're not gonna let us see you?
Can you see me?
No, just the name. Very respectable looking too.
Hold on, let me see if I can figure out how to do this.
Control Alt Delete.
Okay, well, while you're figuring that out, I'll call the meeting to order.
That's your Jack time?
Jack, right there.
Okay.
Um, I don't know about, you didn't hear from Dawn. All right, well, we do have a quorum and it's 6:30, so we'll commence. The agenda tonight is a single item and we're looking initially at a Norwich Solar Technologies application that came in
You get it over.
some weeks ago. And our purpose tonight is to look at that, hear an initial presentation from the applicant. For the planning board to ask any questions about the application, either identified or that occurred to you.
Make it so that they can see me. You know what to do? Right
You thought the audio's on, you might want to mute yourself.
here?
Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
Let's get there. There you are.
Hi. Figured it out.
All right.
I had to ask my wife.
Thank you, Pam.
She's
So
sewing right now.
the application before us tonight, we'll hear an initial presentation from the applicant about the content of it and how they have included information related to the standards in the ordinance. And it's a first opportunity for planning board members to ask questions, to have any discussion we might want to have about this application, to flag any issues that we see. And as you know, the first formal step in our process is to make a completeness determination with regard to applications. We'll talk about that a bit later with respect to this one. And initially hear from the applicant and have any discussion among board members with the applicant that you would like to have concerning questions or concerns. So you're Norwich. I don't know if you have a single spokesperson or if you're all going to be participating, but you know, we're
Want us up here at the podium?
yeah, that would be great if you could come up.
If you want that table to place your things on, you drag that over.
I'm not sure how you're gonna be able to see this anyway, and I know you all have the notebook, so that might be the preferable location. But my name is Martha Stathis. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Norwich Technologies. We have offices in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And with me is Jeff Martin. Is a project manager on our team, but Kara Moody from Stantec Environmental is our environmental consultant on this project, and Kara and I will do most of the talking, I think, or answer the questions if we can, and then Jeff makes sure I say everything accurate. So let me tell you a little bit about Norwich first. Norwich Technologies has been in the solar development, engineering and research and development business since 2011. Was founded by two gentlemen out of Dartmouth that have really done more in research and development, and then wanted to bring solar to commercial businesses, not so much residential, but that's where we are. We have done residential, but we do mostly small businesses. We have about 30, we've done about 30 megawatts of solar since then. And, we have 63 megawatts of projects, capacity of projects in our pipeline. So we're developing and installing, we're vertically integrated. We start with our development team. We have our own engineering group for the solar side of it. And then we have an operations and maintenance group called Runtime Solar. So we will be operating and maintaining this project as well. So we'll be around for a while. I'm gonna I'll turn this over to Kara to describe the project, the location, the work that we've done to put into the application, and then we can answer questions as you would like.
I'm just gonna add one thing on to the Norwich blurb, and just to mention that they have, well, us together, we've permitted, I don't know, 10 or 12 other solar projects in Maine, so we are obviously familiar with the state regulations and are learning the regulations here in Readfield. So the project is proposed off of Main Street, Route 17 on the south side on tax map 143, lot 14. It's about a 975 kilowatt alternating current solar array. It's a fixed tilt array, meaning that it is just mounted at a fixed angle, doesn't move like the tracker projects do. And I understand there's another solar project in Readfield. I believe that one is also
That's
fixed
fixed,
tilt. So
yeah.
it would look similar in design as that, but I believe this project is a lot smaller than that one. So this project would be right around 9.5 acres within the fenced area. So the entire array is encompassed by a perimeter fence, and that area is around 9.5 acres. And then the total project area is about 17.5 acres. So that includes, you know, the access drive into the array, any shade management areas, and, you know, temporary laid out area that they need during construction and whatnot. So the array itself is located in the rural zoning district. There are other zoning districts on that parcel, but the array is sited within the rural district. We did a wetland and water body and vernal survey of the property a couple of years ago. I think at this point, there will be no impacts to any natural resources as a result of the project. We did identify some wetlands and a stream on the site, but we're more than 75 feet away from the stream and no wetland impacts. So in addition to seeking approval from the town of Readfield, the project will also require a decommissioning permit from the DEP. So they, you know, have the new solar, well, not so new anymore, solar decommissioning law that goes over, you know, all the standards that solar developers are required to meet when it's time to decommission the project, which includes, you know, financial assurance mechanism that is in place prior to the start of construction. So that application will be filed with DEP, you know, likely after we get through the local process. Also, we'll need a stormwater permit by rule application from the DEP. So that's to account for the impervious area that's going to be created as a result of the project, which is right around 0.25 acres. Those are the only DEP permits needed, and then our other state permit will be an entrance permit from the DOT. Again, that application will be filed after we go through the local process. That's kind of the project in a nutshell. Yeah, I mean, as part of our typical due diligence at the start of any project, we reach out to Maine Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, Maine Natural Areas Program, and Maine Historic Preservation Commission, and then the federally recognized tribes in the state to see if they have any concerns on, you know, environmental, endangered species, natural communities, cultural resources, all that stuff. So there were no concerns identified from any of those state agencies with this particular project. we'll keep our overview fairly high level and let you all ask us the questions that you're interested in. I know there's a lot of information in the application that we provided. You know, we went through the ordinance pretty closely and hopefully have addressed all of the requirements and look forward to answer questions.
I have a general question about the decommissioning. This may be something that we need to talk to the town attorney about a little further as well. I've read the legislation and, I know generally what DEP's responsibility is with regard to decommissioning, but one piece I read in here is about situations potentially in which you and the municipality might both be looking at a decommissioning plan. Or the DEP and the municipality would be looking at one. And, what I'm thinking about is a situation where the municipality might be looking for a greater amount in terms of a bond than DEP would be. I know that you said in here that if there is such a situation, and I'm assuming that you're talking about that kind of a situation, that the applicant would be looking to do a single bond and have DEP and the municipality be co-operatives in that regard. And do you have any experience with that actually happening with the town and DEP and you?
I do with you.
Yeah,
In setting up a project like
Yeah.
this?
yeah.
Yeah, that happens occasionally. Most towns are kind of just like, we don't want to deal with it and they let it go through DEP. But there are certainly some that do, and that you're right, they're like co-beneficiaries of the bond. Sometimes, like you said, a town might have a different requirement for decommissioning cost than DEP. And so typically what we see is a single bond in
In the higher
Right,
amount.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't view that as being a problem
No.
for any reason? Okay. I'm not saying we're there yet, but I can see the potential, for that happening possibly.
Yeah, we would just want to understand what it is we're insuring.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
So,
certainly.
and, because, DEP has gone and set up this guidance, if you will, a standard, it makes it, it's more assurance for the array, the system owner, as to what the requirements are going in and whether they can be met and they can budget for it. And a bond or line of credit instrument is a financial instrument that costs money over time, over the project, so you're budgeting for that expense as well. So we would just wanna, work that out with the town.
So do you know if in this application, the amount that was put forward was based on the DEP model?
Yeah.
Strictly because Readfield also has standards with respect to decommissioning.
Right, what is proposed, the draft decommissioning plan, and then this is why it's a draft, so that we can have this conversation and we just submit what all the parties agreed to before going to DEP and then having to revise it, quite frankly. So, the plan that has been, drafted is consistent with, Maine DEP and the guidance that we have, submitted at half a dozen other project sites around, mostly around the Augusta area, Winthrop, Hollowell, Wilton, Romford.
And so you don't recall any specific project or situation where the town was looking for something different, a higher amount than
What?
DEP?
Well, what has happened in the past, I'm thinking of Thompson in particular. What has happened in the past is we have presented it and they've had a third party civil engineer look at it and assess whether they felt that it was consistent with what our civil engineers proposed. The cost estimate that's in there and is how we arrive at what the value of it is. is revisited, what's it, 5 years? Is it
Yeah, well-
every 5 years?
You go 15 years and
15.
then every 5 after that.
Yeah.
This DEP's, standard, but
Yeah, so that's the DEP standard, and so it's based upon, main wages and expenses, and then, considers having the future review, to address potential cost increases, inflation.
And I guess to piggyback off, what your question is, the only time that I can think of that I've seen a town look for a different amount than what DEP would accept, is like if it's actually written in the ordinance that, the town say requires 110% of decommissioning costs instead of 100% or something like that.
And
So-
I believe that's the case with our ordinance. Henry, you might want to speak to that, but
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, I have seen that obviously written in other local ordinances.
I had a question.
go ahead, Jeff.
You wrote in about, you raised a question about the 10-foot height limit that's in our solar ordinance. And I noticed in the plan, I guess it's C2, it shows a 12-foot height from ground to the top of the array. And I was wondering whether your plan was 10 feet or 12 feet.
The plan is 10, and if that is, incorrect, we'll certainly revise it. So the idea is to just lower the pitch of the angle of the panels. So it's 3 feet from the ground level up to 10 feet on the top.
Yeah, I see where you're talking about on the array detail sheet. It's
Oh, all right.
12 instead of 10.
Right.
Thank you for that.
And also on the drawing C-1.0, I know I could take a ruler and do this, but it doesn't show the number of feet from the sidelines and from the road that the project is located in. I mean, is there a way to just fix it on the land, like you said that it's at least 200 feet setbacks on all sides, but it's hard for me to tell from this.
Sure, yeah, no, we call out obviously some different, measurements in the application text itself. I'm not sure where it's below. But, we can add that to the plan for sure.
Okay, thanks.
I think that's the camera, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but that's, it goes to wherever the voice.
It's weird, no, look,
I'll ask another question. I think that I might have not followed this, but you contacted Inland Fish and Wildlife, and I thought that they indicated that there would be some follow-up or something. Or are they done with their opinion?
yeah, no, they're done, that's basically what they do when they receive an initial consultation letter, like what we sent them. They search their database, to identify if there are any, rare species or essential habitats within the project area. If there are, then they tell us about them, and if not, they kind of have this canned letter that they send in response to all inquiries that says the same thing, pretty much no matter what you're proposing for a project. So I think probably, the letter would have talked about bats and streams and vernal pools, if I recall correctly. Those are their standard things, and just are telling you that, what their recommendations are, not specific to this particular project, if that makes sense. But there wouldn't be any more follow-up from IFNW on this project.
There was some discussion about bat habitat or something. Were they expecting?
Yeah,
about
I
that?
mean, again, that's like their standard language, just saying like that's living trees.
My house.
There's nothing that we need to do for that, from a regulatory perspective for this project.
Okay, thank you.
So that vernal pool language doesn't suggest that, they say, because there hasn't been a comprehensive statewide inventory, says therefore, we recommend that surveys for vernal pools be conducted within the project boundary by qualified wetland scientists prior to final project design to 250 feet beyond the project footprint because of potential performance standard requirements for off-site significant vernal pools, et cetera.
Yeah,
So it suggests that they're,
yeah, I know. I have to say, the response letter is pretty confusing because it makes it sound like there are a lot of other things that we need to do. That's also their like standard CAM language they send with every letter. We did do vernal pool surveys as part of the wetland delineation. Those results are in that wetland report that is in the application.
so, could you talk a little bit about, one thing I noticed was that there is a specific request for a waiver from the background noise measurement requirement. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because in terms of waivers, ultimately the board will have to talk about those and make some judgment about whether or not a waiver is appropriate. And I'd just like to hear a little bit more about that, please.
Yeah, I'll do my best, not my area of expertise. And this is something that we talked with Chip about a couple of times, just knowing, I guess, knowing that the project is going to be extremely quiet. It's only going to generate noise when the sun is up and the facility is generating electricity. And we did our kind of standard sound assessment that we do for all projects, which is included here. And the results of that assessment showed around 32 dBA, and that is at the property line, so measured to the nearest, wherever the nearest property line is, from the noise generating equipment, which are inverters and transformers. So 32 dBA is quieter than this room. It's, about the sound of a, rural, quiet area. That's what they say 30 dBA is. So I guess from our perspective, a background study didn't really make much sense. It didn't seem like it would add a whole lot of value. If it was a project that might be, generating a significant amount more noise than the 32, then. But
I guess I would also add, because of the location of the project, it's approximately 1,000 feet off of the road. There's nearest residence is, I think, 750 feet. It's surrounded by forest. The background sounds of the leaves of the trees and nature, quite frankly. It's just, like I said, for Kara just was indicating, it just didn't feel like it was necessary.
And Chip, when you had that conversation, it sounds like there was a particular requirement that you had in mind that they would be requesting a waiver from. I'm not sure what that requirement is. What were you thinking about there?
Well, I was thinking that it is back in the woods,
No, I mean the requirement. If they're asking for a waiver, it's a waiver from a requirement in the ordinance. What requirement did you have in mind when you had that
I
discussion?
believe we have a requirement within the ordinance for a noise study.
yeah, I think
We had the
it's,
same as in carpet and,
You know where that is?
salad.
I might be wrong. They don't have the ordinance right handy, but
In the
it's
solar
in the solar
Oh, it's in the
section.
solar.
Yes,
Okay,
number like 11 of the
okay.
section 7.
Yeah.
There is a
All right, that
requirement
makes sense.
for background. I mean, it's not a huge ask.
Right.
Okay.
And we even have a definition for pure tone, for the sound.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah. I have a question about sorry, we done with that, sorry.
Yeah, and then there's another. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
What?
Can I ask a question? Or?
Yeah, no, please go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify the size of the project. I know it's written in a couple of different ways, and I'm just trying to clarify in my mind exactly what it is. The ordinance limits it to 20% of the lot size, but that's for all developed areas, including like the electrical lines and everything. And you say it's 17.51 acres, which is greater than 20% of the lot size. So I'm wondering why.
I mean,
It depends on how you do the
yeah.
calculation, so I'm just trying to clarify in my mind.
I guess, you know, I wouldn't assume that you would include, like the area that's considered shade management, which is just,
It includes anything associated with the project, including like the transmission line or anything you use to manage the project or clearing related to the project. So anything that's just, it's the project, it's not the actual solar array, it's the solar system, let's call it. It's defined very specifically in the ordinance.
You're
close to it. Just
Within the fenced area and the road,
Sure.
we are clearing. I mean, it's a predominantly open field, but we are clearing areas to the west and to the north. But then those areas are maintained as meadow, similar to what the site is already. So in the long run, the used footprint is the area within the fence and then out to the interconnect, out to Main Road is the way we were looking at it.
Okay, and that is 17 acres, or is that 10 acres?
No, it's 10, it's like under 10 acres, it's about 10 acres.
Okay,
This is the line, you know,
I just don't, the
Yeah.
question is, what is,
I mean, when we're looking at planning a project, we definitely look at the limit of disturbance. What's the disturbed area? And the disturbance primarily occurs at the time of installation, because I don't know where the guys are gonna park their pickup truck or something, you know, I don't know where they're gonna, so we give them enough room to be able to move around. I don't know where the tractor trailer is gonna deliver the panels and the racking. So we give them a temporary staging area. And then we also are looking to obviously capture as much of the solar energy as we can. So we look to open up a space, east, west, and south if needed. And so in this case, the south and predominantly south and east is, we've kind of pushed it over so that we don't have to disturb or cut more area to the east. But once that is then cut or opened, once the array is installed, then it pretty much, it is contained within the fence. And that's, I mean, we'll mow the field because we don't want it to grow up, but we're not, it's not disturbed, and it's returned to its natural state as much as possible without the trees, obviously. The active used area of the project then becomes where the interconnection line is out to the road, as you pointed out, the road in, and then the area within the fence.
yeah, I guess.
So we were counting the 10 acres as to get the 13.
I guess I would just ask you to maybe look at that again and just
Okay.
read the definition. I mean, the definitions are pretty clear. It includes pretty much everything, including anything for the collection and management, et cetera, any other structures,
So,
temporary or otherwise. So.
question about that, if, so these temporary staging areas that we show on the plan and the Martha was just talking about, that after construction, those are revegetated and are not used again for anything.
Yeah, I think we could certainly talk about it. I mean, it's not clear to me. I was asking the question because it wasn't clear, like what was
Sure,
in that.
yeah,
So
sure,
now
we
you're
can like do
explaining-
a
Now
breakdown
you're
or
explaining, it
something.
makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
What other towns have often like wanted is just kind of like almost like an itemized, you know, like you know, the access road is this, the, you know, whatever fence is this, you know, and then you can, it's more clear to get to the lot coverage.
I would suggest more clarity on that.
Sure,
On
got
on the definition of the 17.51.
Yep,
And you may decide that it's a little less or more.
Yeah,
depending
right.
on How you came up with
Yep,
that in the first
right.
place, right? Now you know there's a sensitivity to it.
yep, right,
You may.
thank you.
I have another question, that is about the utility connections. You also stated in item 14 that, you know, things would be installed to the extent possible underground, but you do talk about the above ground piece very specifically. The way, you know, the ask would be to consider maybe an underground line as much as possible. I understand the interconnectivity at the end to the CMP pole, obviously, as above ground. But there's other ways to accomplish that rather than sticking a whole series of utility lines up that driveway, for example.
Yep.
You may consider that. I think that would be an expectation that's in line with the ordinance rather than what you proposed in the document.
Just as a matter of clarity for me, and I'm sure if I dug through some more, I could figure this out, but the entire parcel is how many acres, and of that acreage, the company is leasing how many?
So it's 75, 72, I have it here. 72 acres, just under 72 acres. And we actually have a land holding company, and so we will purchase, we have a purchase and sale offer under contract with the current landowner. So our land holding company will own the land, and then the asset company will lease the array footprint area, which is the fenced area, and the road out to the main road.
Okay, so the fenced area is 10 acres.
Right.
And
And
the
the road.
entire parcel is 72, and they'll be purchasing how many of the 72?
So our land holding entity will own 72 acres.
Okay, the whole thing.
Yeah, sorry.
That wasn't that.
Yes,
That was
got
not
it.
clear to me.
I had a question about that. So the ordinance requires that there be a buffer, you know, a vegetative buffer if possible. So is there a way to ensure that, and you mentioned that you might be clearing some areas. Is there a way to ensure that along the perimeter of the 80 acres that you, or 75 acres or whatever you own, that there would be maintained a buffer of, I don't know what depth, but some amount of depth so that the site is fully screened and that you wouldn't be cutting down trees up to the property lines?
Right, so if you'll notice on C1, there's the property boundary, the surveyed property boundary. And then the first dash line in is a 50-foot setback in. Yeah, I'm sure it is 50 feet. Yeah, and that is going to remain. And then the idea would be to cut out to that 50-foot. So there'll be a 50-foot existing vegetative buffer maintained on the western side, and then the array is, you know, significantly further from the boundary line on the east and south, and particularly on the north.
Are you referring to a document?
Yeah, it's the same as this. I can show it on here if it's helpful.
Is it in the book or in the plan?
Yep. It's in the plans.
Okay.
Sorry. It's sheet C-1.0.
Okay.
And this is the property line. The dark dash line, and then there is a scallop that goes, it's set in 50 feet from the property line, and that's where the cutting stops. And there's just clearing out in this section right in here. Cutting of the trees. So we maintain a 50-foot vegetative buffer on that western boundary.
And how much on the other boundaries?
The other.
Well, the other
side-
boundary is actually the vegetation is already cut out to the property line on the east. And then the south is way down here. The parcel is significantly, this is only 10 acres and the entire parcel is 70. So it's a long skinny parcel. And then we are cutting some trees on the northern side of the array for the temporary staging area. We want to utilize the existing farm road as much as possible and not create a new disturbance. So we're coming in the existing farm road. We have to have a hammerhead turnaround for vehicles and the staging area. And so this is approximately the length of 1,000 feet.
But the array is 1,000 feet. from
Yeah,
Main
so
Street.
from Main Street to the top of the array is 1,000 feet. And that vegetation is all being maintained.
Which is about 435 feet of existing forested vegetation that will stay in place between Main Street and the array. And then there's another 500 feet of existing forested vegetation between the array and the nearest residence, and all that will also.
Is there a reason?
Well, how do we know that will be maintained? Why, how do we know that for sure? The vegetative buffer?
We're committing to that.
I mean, I assume that, you know, whatever final plans are approved, that's what they're allowed to do. So if it's not shown as being cleared on those plans, that they wouldn't be allowed to clear it without another approval from.
Well, right, and I'll tell you, our financiers, we have to conform to our approvals or we won't maintain our financing. So, yeah. We have to meet the requirements of our permits and approvals.
Quick question, is there a reason why you would cut all that just for temporary staging purposes? Is there a reason you can't use already existing open space as a temporary location?
Yeah, only,
Just wondering what your rationale is.
yeah, I know, it's a good question, because I fought with the engineers about it too, to be honest. Because I wanted to go down further south, but because it's south and the land sort of starts to slope down.
Yeah.
They want to keep it up as high on the landscape as they can.
The array,
Yeah, what did I say?
no, yeah, I understand. what you're
Yeah,
saying.
the array, the land slopes down, to the south as well as being south. And, I had the same feeling, I just, I don't know why, this is dry and high, and it also, I'll be honest with you, every foot we have to install to interconnect costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
So keeping it up high, also does reduce the cost of the installation.
I probably missed this in the submittal, which seems very thorough to me, but have all the property owners, property abutters been notified?
Yeah, I thought that was actually, I can't remember, because it's been a while since we filed this application. That was something that we did, or if that's something the town does.
Usually do it after, but yeah, sometimes property owners, the applicants take it upon
I
themselves.
provided a list,
Depends.
Right.
usually used at the time of the public meeting
Yeah,
hearing.
And typically what we would do is, when we find an application complete, generally, we find it complete, we agree that the butters should be notified, and we talk about a public hearing, so those things usually come in the end. Henry, did you have other?
I just was curious about one of the, don't take this the wrong way, I have to just sort of get it out.
Yeah.
One of the things that, the town in its comprehensive plan is really looking for is maintaining open fields and spaces and agricultural land and things like that. And of course, this is, not obvious to most people. It is off the road, you don't see it, but it is technically a field.
Yep.
Just wondering, what your thoughts are about that and how, we can be assured that that isn't going to, change too much, and what are your thoughts about, dual uses of the property, for example, or pollination or other things like that. So maybe you can just kind of address that as a general comment, because I think that goes a lot to a lot of the people in town have concerns about over solar development, if you were to call it that, and trying to accommodate, a balance here between open space and alternative energy development.
That's a great question, those are the questions I like. So I actually look at this particular site, as a more favorable solar site, and significantly from that perspective. So solar is, the installation process will be posted or driven into the ground. They can come right back out. This particular site is relatively flat, so we're not grading the topsoil and the agricultural soils away. So we actually are preserving the quality of the agricultural soils. And because of the decommissioning process, it's ensured that those posts come right back out. The decommissioning process includes removing the underground trenching, so all of the roads are connected by one single underground ditch that connects the roads electrically. So other than the posts going in, they're just pounded in, it's not digging a big foundation of any kind. We can pull them back out. We can take that 4 to 6 foot wide ditch that's run the length of it. And we can remove that. The road is already there, so it stays in place, and we're maintaining the agricultural qualities of the site. So I actually think this is this is just my personal opinion, but from my personal opinion perspective, rather than going into a completely forested site and then cutting all of those trees, there's a trade-off sometimes. Some people want to look at the carbon sequestration perspective. And so here we already have an open existing field. We're maintaining that open existing field. We actually have 2 projects in Vermont where we've planted blueberries between the rows. We'll see, this is the farmer's idea. We're all for it. We'll give it a try. So blueberries are lower growing bushes typically, and so they won't block the array. We also have pollinator friendly seeding projects that we have other investors, quite frankly, that want to see that happen. And so where we have had like a cultivated cornfield or a forest that is already disturbed, we'll come in and seed it with the pollinator friendly seed mixes. So we like to work with landowners that we lease projects with, in terms of what their goals are. Some of our financial partners have particular goals, and we like to accommodate that as much as possible. We've also done sheep. I didn't think about that. And I almost forgot this one. We're gonna try this. We're about to do cows. And I'm pretty nervous about it because cows they're gonna hit against those posts, and I'm a little concerned, but we're
scary.
So you can sell ice cream next to your solar, right?
Then you could be onto something.
So we'll see. It's a project we're doing in Vermont, and
Of course.
Right.
yeah.
Wasn't this site originally a septic disposal site? And that's my recollection, and are there limits on what you can grow or there because of that?
I don't know where this.
It was licensed as a septic disposal site, and so I have, I could guess about the PFAS issue on that site, but it's, it's something that you should.
Yeah, we have another site in Maine or in New Hampshire that we have the same situation, and we did do soil testing there. so far.
Yeah, the state is doing, testing on many of the sites, but the septic sites are a bit behind the others, the agricultural sites. And, there is a plan queued up for septic, but I know they haven't gotten to that yet. But you might want to keep that in
Yeah.
mind, because cows.
Yeah,
cows
kind of
don't like
forgot about
PFAS.
this.
Kara can help you with that.
Yeah. No, we're not planting cows here. It's a different engineering,
And blueberries might not like PFAS either.
yeah. Yeah.
It
I
really,
think the point here is that we're open to that, multi-use. I'm on a planning commission in my hometown, and we're definitely looking at multiple use opportunities
Yeah.
for this kind of a situation.
I mean, the town here is envisioned that in its thought thinking, so I think you should, give some thought to it, and I think as we go
Yeah,
through the
I
process.
thought we put that we would be doing pollinator friendly
Well,
planting.
that's in the operations and maintenance.
I
Yeah.
mean, that is the minimum requirement we
Yeah.
have, but I think, we can
Yeah.
talk about it as we go along,
Sure,
but just give it some thought, but we might want.
no, we're open to that. If you know any farmers too.
A lot of farmers.
So this runs somewhat counter to the concern about PFAS, but prime farmland, you showed the soil report. And my understanding is there has not been an on-site soil survey, correct?
No.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so what you're showing here is that it's the Lyman Tunbridge complex is rated as prime farmland, which is actually comprised of, in the survey, and these are pretty general, so.
Yeah, national,
Yeah, NRCS.
NRCS.
NRCS survey, so you do show that the access area, the access road to the top field, that area is listed as prime farmland. The rest of it is not, although the lower, actually would be the southeast quadrant, which is also the Lyman Tunbridge, but it's got a sea slope, so it's got a higher slope, so it doesn't make the prime farmland head up. But that was the question I guess I had in my mind is, had you looked at that beyond just doing pulling the NRCS soil survey for this?
Not at this point.
if I remember correctly, part of DEP's formula for the decommissioning, there's an element of, they look at as, as one of the factors, whether or not you're dealing with farmland or
The
not.
percentage of farmland, yep.
It's just, how, if you're on farmland or, and it meets the state's definition of farmland, you just have to decommission to a further depth than if you're not on farmland.
That's right. Yeah.
So it goes from
Yeah.
24 inches to
Yeah.
48 inches.
Okay, it's nothing more than
We do, however, have, we do discourage development in our comprehensive plan.
Yes.
Not that this is on farmland entirely, I'm just suggesting, we want to try to avoid that as much as possible.
My question would be, it looks like there's a valuable pine on the property, but you have no plans to cut any more than what's actually in your plan. In the future, would that be something, if the landowner was wanting to recoup some money and harvest some of the wood, is that something you would approach? How would we set that up? I mean, if they own the land, they could just, in theory, have a harvest plan and cut it, so, but I don't know.
well, except that, if they put forward a plan
Right.
and we approve it, that's it, unless they come back and
Right.
modify.
Right, that's nothing you've done in the past in Vermont or
Well,
as far as, because you're gonna, when you clear what you are
Yep.
cutting, you're gonna obviously take that to the appropriate mill or whatever to,
yeah, we haven't done an inventory of the forest itself. Typically what our installation crews do is we use, trees that we cut on the property and grind them and use them as grindings for our stormwater infrastructure. So most of it is used right on site. And then I think there's two questions in there. Future, I would agree with what you were saying, is any future, harvest activity would have to come and get all appropriate approvals. It's not part of, or it's not a request we're making here for the solar array. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, just to clarify, so like the stump grindings are used for erosion control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said earlier that there's one border. It's cut all the way to the property boundary? Did I hear that
No,
right?
50 feet. There's a 50-foot buffer of remaining vegetation. We're
Okay,
not.
I must have
So
misunderstood.
there's a site that's already cleared.
Oh, this is already clear.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's already cleared and hay, quite frankly, it was cut, not a couple, maybe a month ago. This whole field was cut a month ago. I think it's a month. What was it, a month? It was a month. Anyway, it's this summer. And the property line is basically right on the tree line.
on the tree line. Okay.
Yeah.
I did have one other issue that I wanted to, I think all we can do for tonight's purpose is to flag the issue and, Readfield's ordinance has in it a provision that allows for the establishment of what's called a commercial and industrial district. And that was set up to accommodate, commercial, industrial projects in excess of 5,000 square feet. Usually we're talking about structures there. A year or two ago, we had added to that infrastructure projects are also required to go through that zoning process. That specific commercial, industrial, now commercial, industrial infrastructure zoning process. And in part, I think collectively we had added infrastructure to that provision because of our experience with our first big solar project. At the time that project came to us, we didn't have a solar ordinance. And we were looking to try to make sure that a number of different aspects of the project were regulated. And so one of the things that we did was to add it to this commercial industrial process. And we now have a solar ordinance that addresses a lot of, additional aspects that we didn't have the first time through. But as I was taking a closer look at this, in preparation for our conversation tonight, it was pretty clear to me that this project likely falls within that provision. And what that means in practical terms is that the commercial industrial process is a two-step thing. The first step is it's a rezoning, although not in the classic sense, it's a little bit different. It's a variation on rezoning. And the rezoning would allow a large commercial project to go in, large meaning greater than 5,000 square feet. And then the second step is the specific detail, the site review detail, much of which we're talking about tonight. And so, I put this out there because, my detailed look at it indicates to me that it likely triggers that process and that provision in the ordinance. But what I think we should do is consult with the town attorney. And if there is agreement there that, this provision does apply, I think there are a number of different ways through that. I'm not saying, but if it would be a hard no at that point, but it does change the process somewhat in that the rezoning component has to happen and then the site review piece. And the rezoning is, the requirement is that that be approved at town meeting. So,
So is it a rezoning? I've heard you use the word rezoning, I've heard you use the word provision, I've heard you use it as part of the ordinance, I'm just trying to understand, I've heard you use the word process. So is
yeah,
there
all
now,
of those things.
there are, what's that?
The zoning is a part of our ordinance.
Yeah.
Rezoning is something that's accomplished through our land use ordinance. Technically, this kind of a district is more of a floating district.
That's what I was missing,
Yeah,
okay,
you know, the hard rezone.
okay, so is it I'm sorry if I'm asking inappropriate questions, just shut me down. But is it a floating district? Like I'm used to like overlay districts.
Yeah, it's like that.
Right?
Yeah.
But so we're talking about a floating one that is triggered by the size of the development?
Correct. Correct. And usually, you know, this process is not something, and quite honestly, we have another project that hasn't even been submitted, it's pending, that will trigger this provision, but we've never used it otherwise. And that's principally because, you know, there is not a great deal of large commercial and industrial development in Readfield, obviously.
Yeah.
And, so the trigger is 5,000 square feet, and usually we see that, you know, it's the cumulative measure of the structures usually, that would trigger that. The other project I'm thinking of, it's structures that, in excess of 5. However, the ordinance defines structure and it very clearly includes solar panels.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw the district. And then my question is, in the calculation of that 5,000, is it the surface of the panels? Is it is it, you know, we were talking earlier about what is the limit of how do you define yeah, well, that was lot coverage, but I'm just saying, talking about, the scale, how is the scale measured? Like we were talking, the large and medium scale solar project is based on square footage or capacity, and the capacity doesn't really fit within the square footage or acreage. You know, the solar arrays are typically larger than the capacity, or no, it's the other way around. I think it's the capacity is larger than what fits into the footprint. So it triggers it going up to a large scale project. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
There's land area, there's a square footage, and there's a generation capacity, and we were not able to put the two together to qualify, so you put yourself up into the large scale project.
Yeah. Well, I think in this case, what we're talking about here primarily is structures, and because the panels themselves constitute a structure, we would be looking at the cumulative measure of the square footage of the panels. And it would only take, I mean, you know, 100 or less to trigger
Right.
5,000,
Right.
right? So,
Right,
and we're talking many times that.
right.
And just also add for a solar array, like you're proposing, the way we define it is as a solar energy system, SES, so.
Right.
It includes all the components related to it, just as if you would say if it was you know, a Walmart and you had all the air conditioning units in the parking lot, you know, associated with that, right? So it's like, it's not just the building, but the impacted area.
Right, the parking area.
So I would view it as the whole solar system
Mhm.
as the infrastructure of the project.
I assume town meeting is like in June, as they usually are.
It is generally in June. There are, you know, have been historically occasions when the town did a special town meeting for one reason or another. So that's not out of the question. To my knowledge, there isn't, you know, there's not one in the planning stages for this year, but, you know, I do intend to have a conversation with the town manager,
That'd be helpful.
you know, about this generally,
Yeah.
just so that he's aware. But, you know, again, this isn't something that was in the forefront of anyone's mind, given the, you know, the sequencing of it and the timing. And, I think probably when you came in initially was what, a couple of years ago?
Yeah, 21.
Yeah, that switch, I don't remember the exact date. I'm thinking that that inclusion was last year. Adding infrastructure to this
Got it.
industrial provision.
Yeah,
And so, you know, the timing is such that it, you know, may not have even been there when you had your initial conversations. And so, and it's not something, you know, as I said before, it's not something that's used with any regularity. So, I did want to put that out there because I don't want it to, I think we need to address it in some way.
right.
And, you know, what we can do is to figure out what the options are for doing that.
I appreciate that.
So if you want to take a look at that, it's in Article 9 of Readfield's ordinance. And there are some specific requirements and, issues that would need to be addressed to get to the, you know, to the zoning questions. And they're quite, you know, they're quite general. But as I said, that process is a two-step thing. It's the zoning piece
Right.
and then.
It would be helpful to learn what you learn after your conversation with how you are planning to apply it, so that we can address the process efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. So my intent at this point is to have a conversation with the town manager and the town attorney.
Okay,
And I'll put some of this out there and get some input and have a conversation about it.
I appreciate that.
Okay, other questions? No, Brandon? Jack, do you have anything else?
No.
In the land use table, on the application, it does say that it's classified as an essential service. That's what you wrote in the application, but it's not. It's classified as an infrastructure, large scale solar, so.
Yeah, that's definitely not anything we've ever seen before, so.
Yes.
We've always seen solar facilities fitting into the essential service and not an industrial facility, so
Okay.
that's definitely.
New one.
Yeah. Yeah, they were, you know, we're not necessarily calling it an industrial facility, it's an infrastructure. project. I
Infrastructure.
think that's the distinction.
Yeah, there is the table in the ordinance is incorporated into the land use table. It's just a bit confusing the way it's, we kept it separate because we didn't think applicants would like to have to go flipping back and forth between lots of documents.
I did have a question to ask. Is the erosion and sediment control plan, where is that in this?
C21. There's the detail sheet anyway.
Okay.
C2, more details. Like when it goes, I guess I would say C22 is probably where most information resides, from what I can see. And C21 as well.
Okay, thank you.
No, there's additional related information.
Yeah.
Okay, so for planning board members, what, you know, definitely, you know, weigh in on this, but, you know, the thought I have at this point is that we might want to hold off on a completeness determination, you know, which usually involves a butter notification and all of that. until we have a clearer picture of where we need to head with the commercial industrial zoning piece. Because if there is agreement around that, if there's agreement that this project is subject to that, then I think we need to think in terms of this two-step process, which would require the zoning piece to be addressed first. And there may be ways for us to, to do that more quickly than not, and that's part of what I'll look into. But it feels to me as though it might be appropriate to hold off on the completeness determination until we have a better sense of that, and goes ahead with it. And I certainly welcome your thoughts on this.
I don't disagree with you, but I do have a question for the applicant. In Kara, in your app, in the material you wrote, you did put a timeline in there, and of course, every applicant is going to say it's important. But what are the concerns or restrictions that you have concerning the time scale here? Like, what is I realize these projects can be complicated, right? Investors, we have other groups.
Yeah, well,
Just what are your thoughts in general about that? I mean, it's just helpful for us to hear that. I mean, the process is what it is, but I'd like.
right, well, my thought is, we would have liked to have been here a year and a half ago, except we've been held up by CMP, and we've been
Couldn't
studying.
help you there. But yes.
I know. So that's, the timeline is such that, we have been able to look at other programs that the array would fit into, and therefore it's called the Net Energy Billing Program, and that's gonna, the goal would have been to have this project in by 2024. So if we're looking at a town meeting in June, I am pretty concerned, right, as I'm standing here at the moment. We've been able to finally break the logjam with CMP by going into a different program. We have CMP's attention, and as we said in the application, we were gonna be ready to go by the end of the year into the first quarter of next year for installation purposes.
Okay, so
So
ideally, you're looking at 23, kind of get everything ducks in a row.
what's that?
You're looking at a 2023, get everything organized, and then 24 construction.
Yeah, I think our schedule
Ideally.
is November, we prepare the site and we like to do cutting in the winter. And then it would be
Okay.
installation of, the underground in the spring, racking panel, and then, CMP hook it up. I think first quarter of 24. They go in pretty quick once, especially a site like this.
Well, I'm glad you say that, the one we had before did not.
Well, this is much smaller than that. I think that's a 25-acre project, right? I don't know.
Their fenced area is only 15 acres, it's only 5 acres more than yours.
I thought it was bigger than that, but, this is less than this is like a megawatt of solar. It's 975, right? Yeah, so.
But also the construction, I don't know anything about that other site, so maybe that was appealed to, I don't know. But for a site like this, it's gonna be super easy to prep it and start, so that shortens up the whole construction timeline as well.
Thanks.
So just to be sure I understand this, what you would be talking about doing, what you had hoped to do physically on the ground this year, was.
So we were hoping that, so we're end of September, we get through process with the town by the end of October, maybe early November, but if we have a good indication of where we are, then we turn around and file the decommissioning and the stormwater applications right away to the state. We filed the access permit to Maine DOT. And we, notify CMP that we're getting in position to move forward. And so then, they're gonna take another month, right? The Maine DEP.
Well,
going into the winter, we're going into the holidays. I mean, so basically, we're looking, we're ready to go. Is as soon as we get all of our approvals, we're ready to go.
Okay,
Whereas, I guess the only difference, the difference in my head was, we came to CHIP 2021, I think it
Yeah.
was, right?
They don't look here then.
It was, I did the call on the road, I remember where
Yeah, I
that,
don't know.
anyway, it was quite a while ago, and, then we got stuck.
2022,
2022.
April 1st.
Oh, April 1st, 22, sorry. So here we are a year later, year and a half later. And now we finally have a path, we have a path forward with CMP. And I mean, there's no sense of putting in a project if you can't interconnect it. So that has been our holdup and why we didn't come to the town. We, if you come to the town and say, well, we think we're gonna do this, that sounds stupid too. So we were trying to be, clear with what the path forward would be.
quite honestly, it's kind of it could be, a stretch to think that, we're at the end of September, that we would necessarily be through this process by the end of October. I mean, for us, that's essentially 2 more planning board meetings, and, this, part of our process, part of our site review process is a public hearing.
Yep.
And, you never know, as I'm sure you know what you're gonna get, with the public hearing. With our first solar project, there was a fair amount of public input. There were a lot of issues that were raised, a lot of questions, and we had to work through it. I don't know what, I don't know what will come up this time, nobody does, but, all I'm saying is that, the expectation of having the whole thing done in a month may or may not be realistic.
Oh, I didn't mean to say it would be done in a month, because we still have to do all the state process too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, no, I'm appreciative of that. And I appreciate the clarity of this, the commercial industrial thing is certainly, not something we planned for.
Well, let me see what, what I can do with that. I'll,
Appreciate that.
I'll be talking with Chip about that, and he can bring some information back to me.
Good.
Anything else that occurs to anybody?
Paula, if it turns out that we don't have to go through the CID process, what would happen next with this application?
Well, I think if we're not looking at doing that piece of the process, that we could put this back on our agenda and make a formal completeness determination and, notify butters, schedule the hearing and so forth. Conceivably, I hope I can get answers to a number of questions within the next week or so, and have that conversation with the town attorney. And if that happens, it would allow us to put this back on, even the next agenda, which would be October something.
Well, we would appreciate whatever you've learned, hearing about that, and we will make the, edits and modifications that we heard here tonight to the application, in preparation, so that it's all sort of keeps moving along in parallel, as we hear from you.
So one other thing while I'm thinking of it, and that is, do you have anything that would be helpful to us in terms of the relationship between DEP and the municipality, if there is some kind of a co-arrangement on the bond? Do you have any examples or?
I mean, it's.
Let us see what we can find. Let us powwow on that a little bit.
I can talk to DEP too.
Yeah.
It seems more more direct to me if you've got an actual situation.
Right.
Where that arrangement existed.
Right.
It would be helpful, I think.
I just want to talk with her a little bit of, what I'm thinking of, and I think we're thinking different things, and I just want to, get us on the same page. I do that sometimes.
We get it, it's good. Would it not be possible, and I don't know if this is a good idea or not, would it not be appropriate or possible to do like a conditional approval tonight, just so that it's say based upon the fact that the CID is not applicable? So that way, if it's determined that the CID is applicable, then that would just be, nothing would happen, right? You have to
Got it.
go through that process, but if it was applicable, if it was not applicable, then it would automatically trigger the CEO to move forward with the process. So, I mean, it would save them like maybe a week or two.
Yeah.
It could save a couple weeks.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know, or
I mean,
or do you think it's too complicated and we should just, it doesn't really save that much time.
I mean, we could do it that way. We could do it that way. I'm feeling as though it's going to apply. I mean, that's,
Yeah,
I spent a fair amount of time looking at it and, you know, I
so
don't,
therefore, moved.
I don't see how it won't. I think there's a chance.
Yeah.
There's a chance, depending on how my conversation with the town attorney goes. But I think the likelihood is there that it doesn't apply. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts. I mean, I'm not opposed to going ahead and doing it that way. You know, if that's what you would like to do.
I mean, if you could talk to them soon, or talk to the attorney soon and the town manager, I mean, it would only save you. Wouldn't save you much. Save you a week.
every day counts. We're trying to get I mean, like I said, now that we have CMP's attention, I'm trying to take advantage of it, but, you know, every town is different, and so we want to work with the community in a way that it works for you, so I'm very appreciative of the fact that if you can contact the attorney and the town manager and let us know. That's, I hate to say this, but the nature of development is sometimes you go fast and sometimes you go slow.
You know, my other concern with all of that is just, I don't want, you know, to give the appearance that, you know, as a board, we're kind of sweeping that provision under the
Yeah.
rug.
No,
I understand.
You know, in some way, I think we need to address it openly and directly, you know, either, you know, this way or this way, but I think we need to do it with some
Yeah.
transparency and get it out there.
well, I'm appreciative of the suggestion, you know, approving conditionally. If it doesn't apply, you can go forward. If it does apply, you know, slow down. But, thank you for that.
I think we should, one step at a time, no, I think we should use the CID determination first.
Okay.
I withdraw my suggestion. I tried.
I have another issue to raise, which is, when we did Sincarfa, we hired an outside consultant to review the Sincarfa decommissioning plan and make some suggestions. And now we have our own solar ordinance with decommissioning, and the state has its decommissioning stuff. I was thinking, though, it might still be worthwhile for me to reach out to that person and see whether he would be available to review this decommissioning plan in light of both the state rules and our local rules and make suggestions. Although that would be subject to whether we have to go forward with the CID process or not. But at this point, I would just look to see if he was available and what would be involved, how long it would take and whatever.
I think that meant that earlier, a third party review.
That's the same, I think that's the same thing. I think, I guess I would suggest that, certainly, you know, get your ideas and your thoughts. I think that probably we would, based upon the comments we've heard tonight, want to revisit the decommissioning plan, particularly in light of the town, ordinance itself. So before you send it out anywhere, it is a draft, and it's exactly for this kind of a conversation, quite frankly. So we would probably want to confirm that we don't want to modify it to, address the town's concerns better, and then go to the third party person. But,
Yeah.
you know, contact me, find if they're available, certainly.
You know, that probably would be a good idea, because, you know, we got into it a little bit earlier, but the, you know, the town requirements are different than. DEP's
Right,
requirements.
right.
So,
Right,
Okay, I'll do that.
I think while you're waiting, quote unquote, I think it could be good to also consider some of the discussion tonight and how that may, obviously you will, and how
oh, yeah.
you may, prepare yourself for some revision or some thought process there based on your other experiences with your other projects.
Yep, yep, we've been taking some notes up here.
Saves us repeating ourselves when we get it done.
well, thank you very much. It's
Thank you
been
for your time.
really helpful, and, we'll get back to you with some
So we'll-
information just as soon as possible. You'll probably hear from Chip. Yeah,
Okay.
and I'll be talking.
And I would just like to say, depending on how this timeline progresses, I may not be here, but Jeff will be here, with Kara, so you're stuck with a much more handsome young man.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much. The only other thing we had was some minutes, and I have to apologize. I do have a few revisions that I'd like to make, on the, actually it had to do with the Roy piece in particular. And I just want to make sure it's as precise and clear as possible, because that's a project that, you know, who knows, it may wind up in front of the appeals board again. And I just want to make sure that the minutes are as accurate and complete as possible. Sure. So a couple of things I wanted to do to them, and I just didn't have them up to my revisions up to everybody tonight, so we could just do those at the next meeting. Sure. And apparently, thank you for sending the appeals board decision.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I'm not.
That was a new one for me.
surprised at that. Yeah, the appeals board heard a variance request. Fortunately, it was not a project that is in front of or will be in front of the planning board, so, right. It was something that was off to the side, but they denied the variance.
I think it's because it was similar to the previous one for the Roy's.
Yeah, I mean, the standards for variances are very stringent, and, you know, people don't really have a good appreciation for that when they go to these things.
Well,
Yeah,
if I may.
Yeah.
I received today the new update to the subsurface wastewater regulations that we've been expecting since the beginning of this year. There's a couple things that might necessitate incorporation to our ordinances. How would you like me to communicate those changes?
so is there something in the land use ordinance that you think needs to be changed?
Yes, there'll be a couple of areas there that will have to change.
Yeah.
In terms of seasonal conversions, in terms of holding tanks, in terms of things that we specifically lay out in our ordinance.
Yeah. Well, you know, probably what you could do that would be most helpful is just to take those provisions and do a draft revision to them, whatever you think needs to be included or changed. And then we can put that in the queue for ordinance revisions, because we will, you know, have a package. And we can review them. And
Can you remind me where we're at with the
housing,
housing, right?
Yeah.
With, because the tiny housing, I call it, but it's not called tiny housing, but that's what I call it. Because I believe that gets implemented in
July.
July 1.
So the tiny houses are already,
Not, no, you know what I mean,
It's not,
but the auxiliary dwelling.
it's the
the recently passed
LD
LD.
2003 stuff, right, the housing piece. what happened with that was that, DECD, Department of Economic and Community Development, has grants available for municipalities for several different aspects of implementation of that. And one of the things that they have money available for is for towns to make ordinance revisions. And towns can use the money in a variety of different ways, but it can provide support for ordinance revision. So I actually sat in on was a DECD discussion about the ordinance opportunities and you know, what the money could be used for and so forth. And Eric and I both sat in on that. And Eric went ahead and it was a fairly easy process, which shocked me to get the money. So he got the money. It's actually in the bank.
Wow.
And it's available to us. However,
I'm stunned.
this is a really interesting situation where we've got the money, but now we have, you know, no place to
I
spend
can't
it.
even get my employer to give me money.
So we've got money and, you know, and how to use it is the problem. And usually it's the other way around.
Meaning hiring a third party or.
Yeah, you know, like a consultant who could
Yeah, yeah.
actually do this. They were in quite short supply, so. So Eric is kind of looking around for that, and so I've been checking in with him periodically. And in the meantime, I've started kind of scoping out, you know, apparent changes that we would need to make in the ordinance to accommodate. I'd rather, you know, that we have a consultant to help us do that, with some experience, but I don't know who or when, you know, that's going to happen.
But the idea conceptually would be to have some form of ordinance revision before the July 1
Yes.
implementation of the law.
Yeah, you know, I think the thought was to have ordinance revisions lined up, as part of our regular package that would go to town meeting.
I mean, I can't believe there isn't a town in Maine that hasn't already. Must be a municipality somewhere in the state that started to do this process. I mean, the COGS must know, or the.
Yeah, and you know, I think Eric's first thought was KB cog, but they're all blocked up for a variety of reasons, and they really don't have the resource to provide to
Yeah.
us.
Or
If I may.
of other states.
Well, if I may,
Right.
the larger cities and towns, more populous, it's already been instituted. They gave the smaller ones like us another year to figure out how to do it.
Oh.
Yeah, the big
So
ones.
the bigger ones have gone through the process, but we're so much different what their needs are and our needs are. We just had somebody move into town in Sparkman that does this type of thing, and look into that for you tomorrow.
Somebody what? Somebody
A person that does this kind of work, consultant,
who lives in town?
just moved into town, building a house.
We have a vacancy on the planning board, by the way. What about
So,
other states? Have other states implemented? I don't know enough about
Yes.
the law, but I mean, there must be other
Yes.
other states that have done this in Connecticut.
Yes.
I believe Connecticut's one of the time, so maybe there's some groups there we could reach out to.
yeah, I haven't talked to Eric for a couple of weeks about this, but I know that he was gonna continue looking, to see what he.
I'm happy to ask too. I know quite a few people in
Mm-hmm.
different communities. I didn't know that's our plan, but I'm happy to ask around and see if I can find a company as well. Obviously, it takes the right, very specific skill set, but
Yeah. No, that's great.
how much money is it, do you know?
Well, it's not a huge amount of
like
money.
10 grand or
I think it was 10,000.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. It's enough.
Yeah, and, you know, it just my initial look at it, you know, I don't think that to make revisions that are necessary to the ordinance could be consistent with that legislation. I don't think it's a giant, you know, year-long process. I really don't. I think it's easier than that.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's good.
But anyway. I'll check in with Eric too when I talk to that and see if he's made any kind of progress in the past couple of years.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else, anyone? All right. Thank you all very much. We are adjourned.
Everybody available for the next meeting?
Yeah. Okay, if you're not going to be available, just let Chip know, as we you know.